Hello everyone, how you doing today? I'm Steve G for Steve G Fishing, and in today's video I'm going to teach you how to fish new waters in rivers and lakes. So let's go ahead and get started with the video. Whenever I go out to a new area, and we're going to use West Lake Toho, or we'll use Lake Okeechobee, you're going to have the lake, and most of West Lake Toho or Lake Okeechobee, there's not a lot of trees in the area. The only vegetation that you have in the water is you have the cattails, you have the lily pads, and you have the big clumps of hydrilla. Now, whenever I go to a new lake, the first thing I want to do is I want to go out to that lake and drive that lake all around. And the first thing I'm going to look for when I'm out scouting in the morning is I'm going to look for bait fish. If I can find where the bait fish are at, whether they're in the lily pads or in the cattails or in the hydrilla, I'm going to scout that out and find out what time in the morning those bait fish are running. If I can find those bait fish breaking the surface, I'm going to look for sandbars. I'm going to look for the minnows or the bait fish coming up near the shoreline. And I'm going to look to see if there's any bait fish busting in the hydrilla. Now, if I hear explosions in the lily pads, I know first off the bat, my two best baits I'm going to execute on this lake is I'm going to throw a frog out there and I'm going to wheel it through the lily pads or by the cattails or by the hydrilla. I know the frog is going to be one of my 5 best baits. My next bait I'm going to use is I'm going to use a plastic worm, and I'm going to go with a worm that has a heavy weight on it so I can bust through this hydrilla, because I know the hydrilla is all over the place, and I'm going to want to get into where the cattails are as well as the lily pads. So I know right off the bat that my plastic worm is going to be my second bait. So you're going to have the frog, the worm, and my third bait is going to be a Rapala. Now, I've got 3 that I'm going to fish in the morning. I'm going to use the frog, the worm, and when you're fishing a worm, you want to go with a big worm, because a lot of these big lakes, like Lake Okeechobee, West Lake Toho, they have a lot of snakes in there, and when those snakes start laying their eggs and hatching, you got these little snakes that are running around, baby snakes running around. So throwing a big worm can be pretty deadly on these lakes. And when you cast that worm out, make sure you're hitting it into the heavy cover where the hydrilla is with a heavy weight. Or you can fish that plastic worm across the top of that hydrilla, and it'll be really deadly. Now, another popular bait is going to be your fluke. That's going to be your fourth bait, is your fluke. The nice thing about the fluke lure is I can throw it into the cattails, I can throw it into the lily pads, and I can throw it into the hydrilla. That leaves me diversible working all these areas. So the fluke is going to be another one of my popular baits. Now, another one is very deadly in all this, just as popular as the worm, and that is, you guessed it, the jig and pig. The jig and pig, you're going to want to flip that in all these areas, the cattails, the hydrilla, and the lily pads. So my 5 baits to use on a lake that I've never been on that has cattails, hydrilla, and lily pads on there, and I can't find any trees anywhere on that area, I'm going to throw the frog. That's going to be my number 1 bait. My second one is going to be the worm. My third one is going to be the jig and pig. The fourth is probably going to be the fluke. And the fifth one is going to be the Rapala. I know that these 5 baits are going to be productive on this open water, whether I'm fishing West Lake Toe in the state of Florida or I'm out there on Lake Okeechobee. I know the frog, the worm, the Rapala, and the fluke, and the jig and pig are going to be 5 of my best baits to execute this area. I know that that's going to produce fish in the boat. Try that pattern on open water and see if that doesn't work for you. So let's go to my next one. Now my next one is going to be rivers. So we'll do a river. And most of your rivers, everywhere you look, you're going to have trees everywhere. Trees everywhere hanging over the water. The other thing is you're going to have bunches and bunches of lily pads. So you're going to have the trees and you're going to have the lily pads. So whenever you come to a river and there's current coming through, you want to fish in the trees with your jig and pig or your worm. So we'll put down my 5 best baits on a river is going to be the worm, the jig and pig, my next one is going to be the Rebel Crawdad. And let's go ahead and see. Let's see, we got the worm, the jigging pig, the rebel crawdad. So we'll put the worm as being our first best. Jigging pig is going to be our second best. Third one is going to be the crawdad. That's your third one. The next one that's going to work real good in these rivers is you're going to throw a Rapala. The Rapala falls in play really good for on these rivers. And you're going to cast that Rapala where the lily pads are. You're going to cast it where the banks are. And you're going to cast it underneath these trees. So the Rapala is going to be my fourth one. And then your next one, so you got the worm, your jigging pig, your rebel crawdad, the Rapala, and the next one, believe it or not, once again, we'll put 5 down, and that's going to be the fluke. If you are fishing the St. Johns River, listen to this very carefully. If you are fishing the St. Johns River and there is a current coming through, remember the St. Johns River in the state of Florida flows and it has brackish water, so you have salt water mixed into the fresh water. You want to check the tide reports. Very important. I see people go to these rivers, especially the St. Johns River, and they do not check the tide reports. Your high tide on the St. Johns River is going to produce most of your fish versus the low tide. Keep that in mind. If you are getting heavy rain on the rivers, whether it's the St. Johns River or any river, start throwing a jigging pig into the trees where that water starts rising. The worms from the ground are going to be flushing into the water, and the crawdads are going to be moving to the bank lines. So you want to put a jigging pig with a crawdad rubber plastic bait on there, or you want to throw a plastic worm. The worm and the jigging pig are probably going to be my number 1 and 2 go baits fishing the New River. The rebel is going to be really important as well, and the fluke is going to be really important as well. The Rapala as well too. So remember, whenever you go to new waters, pick 5 baits out of your tackle box and use those 5 baits to execute your pattern, whether it is a river or a lake. Use those 5 baits. Don't be afraid to be versatile, trying different baits on different parts of the water. Don't just limit yourself to fishing a worm all day. Sometimes the worm will work for a little bit. Other times the jig and pig will work even better, and the fluke and the Rapala come into play, and that can really fill that live well up really fast. Always remember your morning strikes from 7 a.m. all the way until 10 a.m. are going to be your most productive times of the day. You're fishing the rivers. You want to hit the shady spots on these trees. Throw those plastic worms, those flukes, or those Rapalas underneath those trees. Remember, as that water's flowing, those fish are looking for shady spots to get out of that hot sun. Now, if you're fishing a river and it's cold out in the wintertime, you want to start looking for your springs. Look for the springs. If you got springs coming in, and in St. Johns River here in Florida, we have springs that are coming in all different parts of that river or around Lake George. And you want to look for those springs because in the cold days, that water is going to be nice and warm, and those fish are going to be fluctuating to where the springs are to get out of that cold water. Well, that's all I have for you. Try these patterns. Remember, go into your tackle box, pick out 5 of your best baits, and use those to attack the lake or attack the river. I think these tips will really help you out and improve your fishing. I'm Steve G for Steve G Fishing. Thank you for watching my video. God bless. And remember, if you ever get a chance, take a kid fishing. They are our future. Well, I hope to see you on my next video. And if I don't see you, I want to wish you a Merry Christmas from the state of Florida. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you on my next video.